entire world, and particularly when we're talking about the issuing of Sukuk bonds. This is nothing new to South Africa. We've issued them in the past, but this time around, once again, looking at the Treasury and the issuing of the Sukuk bond, we're joined by Ameen Hassen, Head of Shari'ah Banking at Standard Bank Group, and also CEO at FNB Islamic Banking, Amman Muhammad. To both of you, Brother Muhammad Ameen and Brother Amman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jummah Mubarak and welcome.
Salam.
Right. I mean, let's just start off with, and as I mentioned, Sukuk and the issuing of Sukuk bonds is nothing new to South Africa, is nothing new in the global economy. And just looking at this latest issue of the Sukuk bond and providing us with an overview in context with the South African economy.
Jazakallah khair. I think from a South African perspective, the first thing that we need to remember is that banks have to maintain something that is known as regulatory capital, or what has become commonly known as the Basel requirements. So banks have to hold instruments that are classified as high quality liquid assets. And these instruments generally are fixed income instruments issued by the government. Thus far, standalone Islamic banks and Islamic banking windows in South Africa couldn't fulfill this in a Sharia compliant way. And so they had to forego the income from these instruments. So Alhamdulillah, now Islamic banks will be able to fulfill their Basel requirements in a Sharia compliant way. And the impact of this is huge. Example, one of the CEOs of one of the banks I spoke to the other day said that his income statement will be impacted by at least 30 or 40%. The second is the asset managers. As part of any asset management strategy, you'd always have to seek out what is known as a risk-free fixed income instrument for their income funds and balance funds. So in the development of any financial market, you have to have the sovereign set the benchmark of the risk-free rate, and thereafter commercial players will then enter the industry. And now that we have this in the Sharia universe, I think the data suggests that you'll see the market develop with commercial players now entering.
Yes, and also, Aman, just looking at it from a banking perspective, and we know FNB Standard Bank about the largest of the banks in South Africa, or amongst the largest of the banks in South Africa, and just to understand the involvement of the banking sector in the issue of a sukuk of this nature.
Thank you. First and foremost, all gratitude really does go to the South African government for actually responding to the demands and the requirement for this local currency sukuk. So just to clarify, it is a South African government bond that was issued. The South African government, through its national treasury, invited proposals from interested banking institutions to assist it in providing the advisory services in structuring and issuing of a government Islamic bond, or sukuk as we refer to, in the domestic capital market. And here specifically, Inayat, the request for assistance was to structure the sukuk, to manage and coordinate all the issuance activities, to assist the Treasury in drafting with all the required contracts with indicative issued timelines, obtaining relevant regulatory approvals, details around listing for issuing the bond on the JSE, arrange for all the elements regarding marketing, placing the issue with investors, including in preparing and distributing marketing materials. Also to facilitate the book building process and provide any additional services which were required for the successful launch of a bond of this nature. And Alhamdulillah, the two successful bidders were First Rand Bank through its RMB division and FNB Islamic, and Standard Bank with its consortium. So I hope that gives you a little bit of perspective how the two banks were selected to assist as joint lead arrangers to the National Treasury.
Well, certainly it's quite a process from what you've just described, both from a regulatory point of view as well, and just in terms of the process that needed to be followed, Aman. But Mohammed, I mean, let's just look at South Africa now in the context of the South African economy, and we know that we've got an economy that has been struggling for a long, long time. Ratings agencies, South Africa's borrowing ability, all of that, on the international scale as well, and just looking at this bond, South Africa, because we need cash, we need money, and just looking at this sukuk and the purpose that it would serve, for to the country, to its borrowing, to the borrowing, to the ability for us to actually borrow and lend funds.
If we look at our medium-term budget, which was not too long ago, I think the budget speech carried some key elements around our fiscus. I think in the medium term, South Africa will have to borrow about 553 billion rand per annum, and it's said that our fiscal debt will stabilize at around 77% of GDP only by the year 2025, 2026, in that fiscal year. So definitely South Africa is on a path of a consistent borrowing, but it's not something that is, and this is my opinion, I don't think it's something that we need to be overly worried about. I think it's emblematic of an emerging market economy. But in terms of economic development, what will happen is the proceeds of this sukuk will flow into the National Revenue Fund. And what macroeconomic theory teaches us is that the largest spender in the economy is the government. And whenever there is an autonomous investment into the economy ought to eventually result into a rise in overall income levels through the multiplier effect. So this sukuk is that autonomous investment into the economy. Yes, it is part of the South African borrowing profile, but it's an autonomous investment into the economy. And it's from a new pool of investors who had this liquidity held in other instruments. So inshallah, we can be proud as the Muslim community of South Africa. We are an active part of the South African economy. We will be aiding the economic development of South Africa. And the sukuk will form part of a broader funding program that will complement the South African government's fiscal program.
Shukran for that, Mohammed Amin. And just to bring Aman back into the discussion, Aman, now we know that this is going to be a rand dominated sukuk, where previously we know it was dollar dominated. And looking at where we are as far as the currency is concerned, the rand obviously has been, has been pretty weak. Actually, it's been volatile. Actually, it's been quite a volatile currency. But the fact that this is now a rand dominated sukuk, is this aimed purely at the local market?
This transaction marks a significant milestone in the government's funding strategy. And when you look at the indications and statistics, the transaction was 1.74 times oversubscribed, with investor demand from a diverse investor base, which included a large proportion of South African banks, Islamic funds listed in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and other Islamic financial institutions. So yes, the original intention for the listing of this particular sukuk, as Ameen had touched on in his opening, was really to assist many of the Islamic financial institutions within South Africa, to actually promote and even grow our respective Islamic financial industries. And I think one of the key things that one needs to take into account is when you see such a successful subscription to the bond when it was launched, it clearly demonstrates the need for a product like this. And I think what it would provide is a fantastic foundation for other more innovative Islamic financial products to come across. So yes, most definitely will aid the South African economy and industry. And yes, it is a rand-denominated sukuk, and we are looking forward to further issuances of this nature.
Yes, and a moment, I mean, just to come in and just following up from what Aman is saying and looking at South Africa and looking at Islamic finance, now we know it's actually grown in leaps and bounds, and we've seen so many products. And the sukuk, on like you mentioned, at a macro level as well, and looking at it purely from a fiscus, looking at it from a government perspective as well, in terms of plugging, any gaps that the government may have from a borrowing perspective as well. And I'm sure that, looking at just the performance of Islamic finance products, even throughout meltdowns and throughout some very, very difficult periods in our lives, even during the time of the COVID pandemic. The fact of the matter is there's a lot of merit as far as Islamic finance is concerned, as far as Islamic finance products are concerned, and also the Sukuk in particular.
Absolutely. I think Amman spoke about the oversubscription. What that says to us is there's definitely pent up and latent demand for this, and we'll definitely begin exploring with National Treasury future plans for Sukuk. And I think if you look on the global front, if according to International Islamic Financial Markets, if you look at their latest publication on Sukuk, you're starting to see some key trends over the medium term. And I think one of the key trends that you probably would see is the convergence of Sukuk and ESG or sustainable financing. We're already starting to see green Sharia compliant Sukuk. In nominal terms, we probably see the global Islamic finance industry reach about $4 trillion US by the year 2027. That's on a compounded annual growth rate of about 25% per annum. And Sukuk will be a large part of this. So from my side, I think it's definitely a sector of financial services that we can no longer treat as something on the peripheries of the economy. It's something that is now starting to stabilize itself at the core of every economy. So I would say that our viewers must watch this space, inshallah.
Jazakallah for that. And Aman, we know looking at South Africa, there's always this call for foreign direct investment. And looking at this Sukuk bond issue and looking at interest from foreign players, perhaps even overseas investment in the Sukuk bond issue, what are the probabilities, or just your thoughts on, especially in view of South Africa, seeking, have been actively seeking. Even we've seen it with the president, we've seen it at the World Economic Forum, we've seen it right across the entire world, where South Africa has been seeking a foreign direct investment into this country.
Most certainly an important point of discussion. And when we look at the historical performance of the dollar-based Sukuk that was issued in 2014, we found that that issuance that was listed in the Luxembourg Stock Exchange was 4 times oversubscribed. So when you look at South Africa as an emerging economy, and you look at the issuance of this type of instrument, being the Sukuk, you find that it allows for a different class of investment that attracts a different class of investor that would have never looked at South Africa as a potential destination for their foreign investment. So alhamdulillah, the Sukuk really does allow foreign investors looking for a profit-based return a credible alternate to any other type of investment they would have otherwise considered. So from our perspective, we will pursue and work as hard as we possibly can with the South African government to continue issuing these types of bonds. Because I think something that all Muslims in South Africa should be proud about is that for a small community that we are within the grander context of South Africa, we're able to deliver economic solutions that will help the entire country. So our contribution as a Muslim community will definitely be recognized. And we're also grateful to the government for assisting us in launching and issuing these types of financial services products.
Well, shukran for that, Aman. And just a moment, just before we take leave, I'll give both of you an opportunity. Just some final thoughts on what we've been talking about.
No, I echo Aman's last sentiment. As a minority people, as minority communities, you have to always fight more than the majority just to get some basic services in. And I think we're really fortunate as Muslims in South Africa to have dedicated legislation that accommodates for Sharia compliant products and services. And I think it's something that we as Muslim community in South Africa can be proud of. Stats say that we contribute almost 10% to GDP. And I think if you look at this, 20 billion is not a small number. Demand for it was 35 billion. So I think we show thanks to our government. As Amman said, we're lucky to be in a country where the freedom of our religion extends into the realm of economics and our finance. And as Muslims, I think we should stand proud that we are patriotic. We've proven our patriotism over and over, and now we're showing it in economic terms as well.
Well, shukran for that. And Aman, just a final word from you.
Inayat, we are a small Islamic financial services industry, but with the launch of products like this, inshallah, we will see explosive growth in a variety of Islamic financial products, from banking to insurance to asset management, private equity. So alhamdulillah, with more products like this coming across, we aiming to see an expanded and stronger Islamic finance services industry. Thank you.
Well, Jazakallah to both of you, to Aman Mohammed and also Mohammed Ameen Hassen. We say shukran to you. Have yourself a wonderful Jummah ahead as well. And we thank you. We appreciate your time with us this morning right here on Salam Media.
Jazakallah khair. Salam wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The head of Sharia Banking at Standard Bank Group, Ameen Hassen, and CEO at FNB Islamic Banking, Aman Mohammed, with us this morning against the issuing of the Sukuk Bond in South Africa. The time is just gone, 8:21. We come back, we'll be joined by the Director of Women's Section at the Central Media Office of Hizb ut-Tahrir, Dr. Nazreen Nawaz.